Welcome all to another Zeteo town hall. This one is a breaking news town hall. We are live on a Friday afternoon here in the United States on the East Coast. I'm joined by one of our newest contributors, Rula Jebreal, foreign policy analyst, author, Middle East expert, Italian, Israeli, American-based, expert on all sorts of global issues. Who better to speak to in a breaking town hall, which is something we wanted to do to respond to last night's events with the Israeli attack on Iran, following the Iranian attack on Israel, following the Iranian attack on Israel, the Israeli attack on Iran, and we can go back decades, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Who started it, as we said in the playground? Rule is here to provide context. Zeteo is all about providing context. Please do stick your questions in the chat. My team are going through the questions. I will try and ask as many as possible in the short time we have ahead, but I get to ask questions first. Rula, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you on board with Zeteo. I'm just going to jump straight in. How worried are you about the state of the world, in particular the state of the Middle East? How worried are you right now on this Friday afternoon?
Hello, Mehdi, and congratulations. And I'm so excited to be part of this amazing team of independent journalists who contribute to Zeteo. We need the truth and fact-based reality and analysis more than ever now. The truth will save us. But how worried I am? I'm terrified. I'm terrified for all our people in the region. I'm concerned that that America will be dragged to another war in the Middle East. I think what we've seen from this far-right Israeli government, an irrational, reckless, and lawless government who now feel so emboldened, Mehdi, because the world showed them unconditional support and basically never held them accountable. This empowered the worst element of extremists in the Israeli government and in Israeli society, by the way. And what terrifies me the most, they don't understand that there are consequences to any of their actions. What terrifies me most, that we're looking at the Iranian reaction, the regime that you and I criticized for many years, and we're hoping they will be more rational than the Israelis. We are at this point in time.
And it's not the first time we've had to do that. Donald Trump infamously assassinated Iranian General Qasem Soleimani on Iraqi soil back in, I think, January 2020.
Yes.
And the only way we avoided World War III then was because the Iranians showed quote unquote restraint by firing some missiles at an American airbase and giving the soldiers, I think, what Donald Trump dismissively called headaches. And when people tell me, well, Trump never started a new war, I always say he tried to. It was Iranian restraint that prevented it. Interesting. Let's jump straight to some of I've got lots more questions for you, Rula, but one of our subscribers, Michael Connors, and if you have questions, write them in the chat. I will try and get Rula to answer them live. Michael Connors asks, why does Netanyahu not only have an interest in expanding this conflict, but dragging the US into a war with Iran as well? And really, he's been trying to get the US to fight a war with Iran on Israel's behalf for many, many years now.
Absolutely, Mehdi. I mean, there is a long history of Benjamin Netanyahu trying to get the United States to fight Israel's war to the last Americans, and not only the Iranians. Remember, he is the man that thwarted and torpedoed the Iran nuclear deal. Yes. He's the guy that testified to Congress in 2020 about the Iraq war before the Iraq war, said that it was going to have positive reverberation around the Middle East. That war destabilized the entire Middle East, created the biggest refugee crisis, created extremists. In Iraq, we didn't have extremists, and we didn't have Islamists, and we didn't have Al-Qaeda. Thanks to that war, yes, that not only we had Al-Qaeda, from Al-Qaeda, you have the birth of ISIS, and you have the decimation of the society there. And by the way, who won that war? Iran. Nobody underscore the most important element of that war. There was two invasions, the Americans and the Iranians. The Iranians won, and they became a regional power thanks to that war.
Without a shadow of a doubt, it was a blessing for the Iranians, and they now, have more influence and leverage over the Iraqi government than any other country in the world. It's interesting that Netanyahu claims to be most opposed to Hamas and to Iran, and yet he has done more to empower Hamas and Iran than any leader on planet Earth. And you would think someone who went in front of Congress in 2002, 22 years ago, and said, trust me, invading Iraq will be great for the region. He was so wrong about that. You would think that no one should ever take him seriously again. Instead, He's gone on to be the longest serving Israeli prime minister ever. And now, right now, he has basically got a Democratic president in the White House doing his bidding, listening to him, enabling him, covering for him, arming him, funding him, protecting him at the UN. How do you think Joe Biden has handled this Iran crisis so far?
I think it's basically he's undone his legacy. You and I supported Joe Biden. I actually was very excited about the whole project, pro-democracy, multi-ethnic democracy, that not only here, I remember Joe Biden during one of the debates saying they will hold accountable basically their allies. And he was referencing to the Saudi regime. He said, we'll treat them as a pariah state. Yes. It was a hopeful moment. It was a moment where people who believe in rule-based international order, on legality, accountability, that it's the basis of international order. We thought if he can say this about an ally like Saudi Arabia, then that means that he will put on notice any other ally, you have to abide by the rules. But then what I saw since the beginning of this war, in fairness, I saw something that disturbed me when he withdrew from Afghanistan. I was in favor of that move, but the way he's done it, but then he dismissed totally the pain and the suffering of the Afghans. And this is when I realized he has empathy, probably Joe Biden, but not for everybody. That there,
like his empathy like is very...
Exactly.
It is a huge problem, because obviously we have the genocide going on in Gaza. You have 30, 40, 50,000, who knows how many people are dead right now, much higher than the official numbers.
Yes.
Children killed in record numbers, and you have Joe Biden not showing the empathy we would expect from someone like him. What's interesting, though, is that the Iranians have almost provided a gift for Israel in the form of a distraction from Gaza. And Muhammad Ali Hamid, one of our subscribers, asks, let's just pull up his question. He says, what impact do you think this new conflict will have on the active genocide in Gaza and the Palestinian cause in general? From where I'm sitting, Rula, it looks bad for the Palestinians because we've stopped talking about Gaza. We're just talking about Iran now.
I think it's distracting from what's happening in Gaza. It's distracting even from Biden's own complicity and responsibility. And let me put this in context. Not only he provided the weapons this is a war on Palestinians that has been fought with Americans, with direct partnership with an American administration. He provided tons of weapons. He provided the military aid, financial aid. He cut aid to UNRWA, which is feeding Palestinians in the middle of a starvation and in the middle of a famine. And then not only he vetoed every UN resolution, and now he goes on air, it's like, I care about destabilization, when he knows that the main driver of destabilization and escalation and radicalization in the Middle East is the Israeli behavior, is the Israeli government behavior, not only in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria. In February, they bombed 2 pipelines inside Iran. We know who did that. We know the Israeli did that.
The New York Times reported just recently that the Israelis did that. And we just talk about the consulate attack in Syria. In fact, Israel has launched multiple attacks on Iran, covertly and overtly. They say Iran's attacking us every day through their proxies, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, which has a degree of truth to it, of course. But they are also attacking Iran on Iranian soil, cutting off gas supply and heating to millions of Iranians. Pretty sure Americans wouldn't tolerate another country attacking our gas pipelines, our gas supply. But the Iranian response, Rula, to go back to that previous question, and to add another one, another attendee to the town hall asks, do you think Iran gave Netanyahu a lifeline by retaliating to the consulate provocation?
Yes and no. Yes and no. So no, because when you attack a consulate and you kill 16 people, the Iranian regime that cares about its image in the region, and it's a powerful, it's a powerful country. It's 80 million people. Nobody even discussed that. Israel is 7 million people. Iran is 90 million people with huge, capacities, military capacity. Yet it has, they wanted to be attacked and kill their own people, and they didn't want them to react. So they wanted to signal to the rest of the region, not only to the Israelis, there will be consequences and repercussion. I think the world reacted immediately, saying, we don't want a regional war. We don't want to destabilize world economy and oil supplies, and we don't want to really wreck the region. So it put the world on notice about Israel behavior. In the same time, obviously, who's paying the price are the people in Gaza who are being killed, including airstrike on kindergartens, on UN shelters, UN schools, and even on playgrounds. I mean, they killed scores of children who are playing. And all of this continued to happening and the famine continued to happening.
Meanwhile,
and the world obviously is talking about, oh my God, they sent some projectile that were all intercepted. And while Israel is killing thousands.
Injured a little girl, Israeli Arab girl, who thankfully has not passed away. Thank God, and we pray for her recovery. But compared to the tens of thousands of children killed and maimed and wounded in Gaza, I mean, I don't know if you saw the Israeli ambassador to London, Zippy Hotovely, former deputy foreign minister, who I interviewed many years ago.
Yeah, said, imagine.
She was saying, imagine if this had hit an Israeli city and killed civilians in a crowded area. It's like, really? Do you have no self-reflection? Do you have no self-awareness? No. As to what you've done in Gaza City, in Rafah, in Khan Yunis?
Because Mehdi, she and her government and cabinet minister, and sadly, a large chunk of Israeli society, they don't see Palestinians as equal human. They even verbalize their disgust and disdain and willing to kill Palestinian in the thousands. Last night, I was watching an Israeli television show because I watched them just to understand how they talk about Palestinians and where this society is heading. And I noticed two things that really terrified me. One, they were all horrified that Palestinians in Gaza were going to the beach yesterday, which is an affirming of life. People had been bombed for 6 months, been starving, saw hundreds of their children and 14,000 children killed, 34,000 killed, and others buried under their rubble. So in affirming their right to live on that land and also to celebrate life, they took their children to the beach. The Palestinian society went crazy. They looked at them and they said, we lost the war. Israeli pundits and politicians said, and they actually admitted they lost the war because militarily you cannot defeat Hamas. But then they said, but if Rafah still stand, the last Palestinian city, the last line of existence of Palestinians, then it will be a major defeat. And for us to feel better about themselves, they said, we need to decimate Rafah. They basically saw that signal of Palestinians celebrating life and affirming life and swimming in a beach as a signal that we did not kill all of them. We need to raise to basically wipe out all Palestinians. And that's for them what victory is. Not eradicating Hamas, it's killing even more, a larger number of Palestinians.
Clearly, that's what the far right in Israel have not hidden that they want. And even the quote unquote center-left or liberals in Israel, they pointed to the beach pictures and they see, it's not a genocide. It can't be a genocide. They're enjoying themselves. Let me ask you this, since you mentioned you watch Israeli television, you are an Israeli citizen. Do you, Abdullah Zini, and we have a lot of questions, folks. We're trying to get through as many as we can in time with Rula. Abdullah Zini, one of our subscribers, asked in the chat, do you consider yourself to be an Israeli Palestinian or a Palestinian Israeli? Put differently, a little bit more broadly, do you consider Israel to actually be multicultural, the society, as opposed to the government, and more blended than the Israeli Hasbara machine would have us believe?
I'm sorry, let me repeat the question. Tell me if I understand. If it's a multi-ethnic society, multiracial, multi-ethnic society, Israel?
Blended, and how do you see yourself as a member of that society? How would you define yourself? Is a question from Abdullah Zini.
I'm a global citizen, let's put it this way. I'm somebody who believes in multi-ethnic, multiracial democracy, in equality and freedom for all. I look at Israeli society and the transformation of that society, and it terrifies me. It terrifies me how Jewish supremacist is the law of the land. It terrifies me how sitting ministers and I remember in 2018 from the podium of the parliament, Smotrich, who at the time was a parliamentarian, who's now a finance minister, and he's actually in charge of a lot of the decisions that are being implemented today in the West Bank, the ethnic cleansing of Palestine from the. He stood in the parliament and looked people like myself, who are Palestinian Israeli, who are elected, who are part of the discourse and the democratic process in Israel, looked at us and point the finger and said, you are here by mistake. We did not finish the job in 1948. We did not. Basically, he was telling us, and this is why when they start depopulating Gaza, which is the real objective of what they're doing in Gaza, of their war on Palestinians, I went back to that quote, and I remember that quote very well, because it was a threat, it was incitement, but he was verbalizing their agenda. Their agenda is to depopulate Palestinians and wipe out Palestinians, ethnically cleanse them from everywhere. What's happening in Gaza will not stay in Gaza. It will come to the West Bank, and sooner or later, Palestinian Israeli like myself will actually be wiped out or forced to basically leave with terrorism, but also with legislation. I mean, they're now proposing legislation to take away our passports, our citizenship, if we dare to criticize the government, if we dare to do anything that sounds like incitement. Incitement means even criticizing the occupation. Mehdi, we're looking at a far-right government that is willing to implement its ethno-national state, its supremacist Jewish state, but also its colonial project by any means, with the help of the West.
With the help of the West, but also the help of some of its Arab neighbors, Rula. Ali Salame.
Absolutely.
Ali Salame asked in the chat, if we consider this to be a proxy war between Iranian influence in the Middle East and Israel, backed by the US, why do you think that most of the Arab nations are trying to maintain neutrality or silence or worse, disaffection when there is so much at stake? Ali's being generous. It's not just neutrality. They helped defend Israel very recently, which is ironic because Israel's always complaining about Arab nations in the region, about being isolated. And yet the same Arab nations they disparage came to defend them from Iranian rockets and projectiles and drones.
Well, you have to go back to 2010, 11, the Arab Spring. This is when hundreds of millions of people went to the street demanding freedom, democracy, and dignity. And I always remember who was the most threatened by this? Israel, who claimed to be the only democracy in the Middle East, but basically prop up and support all Arab dictators. I remember also an Israeli analyst and an Israeli general from the Israeli television who said, the only way we can maintain basically control of the entirety of the land if we have Arab dictators helping us. We need to create an axis. So you have the axis of the resistance, what they call themselves the axis of resistance, Iran and their proxy. But then you have Israelis and their proxies carrying, continuing to do their bidding.
Defined, by the way, Rula, in very sectarian terms. They talk about the Sunni world versus the Shia world. Israelis love to exacerbate sectarian tensions between Muslims, and sadly, too many people in our community fall into that trap.
Absolutely, and they managed and succeeded to convince them that the real threat today is Iran. Yet, we've seen over and over and again that Israel has no regard for the holy sites, the Islamic holy sites, that the Jordanians and the Saudi claim that they want to protect and preserve, and their legitimacy depend, partially on that. They have no regard for any life when they actually took to the Emiratis. I believe went to the Emiratis, the Mossad, and carried out multiple assassination attacks on Emirati soil, and the Emiratis did nothing. They didn't know even about it. And I believe Israel, this is a wake-up call for these regimes. Israel will not defend you, will not protect you. They don't care about you. They don't care about the Palestinians, but they don't care about you, and will do anything to basically carry out their project, which is, by the way, it's Greater Israel. They believe that Jordan is Palestine. Palestinians should go to Jordan. They will wreck the relationship with Egypt if they invade Rafah. And they're willing to wreck the relationship with Saudi Arabia. And you saw how they even exploited the relationship with Qatar. They've been begging Qatar to finance Hamas, and now they're bashing Qatar as, they finance terrorism, when they themselves sent the head of the Mossad 3 weeks before the attack, October 7th, begging him to continue to finance Hamas. And now they're saying, Qatar is bad. And
it's not just the Israelis. You have the Republican Party senators like Ted Cruz also saying the same thing. And the Qataris have pointed out, hold on, you guys, America asked us to host Hamas, asked us to host the Taliban, be your middleman, and now you're attacking us and demonizing us, which is
exactly
classic. Just on in terms of what happens next, senior Iranian officials have told Reuters today, after the reported Israeli strike on Iran last night, there is no plan for immediate retaliation, they say. And there's no clarification, they say, on who is behind the incident, which is ironic because for years, Israelis have covertly attacked Iran, and Iran has accused Israel of murdering, assassinating nuclear scientists, attacking gas pipelines, as we discussed. And now Israel's like, yeah, we did this one. And Iran's like, well, maybe you didn't, because they may be looking for a way out. Do you think that the Biden administration, for example, can point to this and say, okay, we're done here. We managed to keep, it from escalating? Or is escalation where we're heading?
Yes, escalation is exactly where we're heading. I think we need to get ready and prepare, because the next war is a war with Iran. I don't know if it will be in 6 weeks, 6 months, or 6 years. But this is, at this point, trajectory is clear. All the indicators are heading in that direction. What scares me the most in this moment, where, Biden is 80-year-old, whether he wins or lose, I think he demonstrated deep weakness in trying to restrain anybody especially the Israelis. I think we have a far-right government that is itching for war and pushing for war. I mean, anything can happen in the next week or 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years where they hit an Iranian facility with tons of victims, creating, tons of casualties, and then the Iranian regime will hit in basically with the same thing. When you listen to the Iranians and the way they talk, and I'm not talking about the politicians or the leaders. Listen to the generals, especially the people who operated in Iraq for a long time, who fought in Iraq. This is an army that's been fighting in Syria, in Iraq, and in Yemen, and everywhere. They're well trained, they're ready, and they have millions of these militias, and they have also their traditional army. But one of the things that I listened to the general who took place of Soleimani, basically, and he said, if Israel will hit a military target, we will hit a military target, and they will hit a civilian target, we will hit a civilian target. And he pointed out to the Ministry of Defense of Israel, which is embedded in Tel Aviv, in the middle of an urban area. So when they talk about human shield in Gaza, remember your Minister of Defense and Intelligence Ministry and other, military area. In a very crowded civilian areas. You were lucky this time that the Iranians warned the region, and the region
and hit a military base in the desert,
and
right?
Hit a military base in the desert, but they did not hit a civilian base or a military base in Tel Aviv.
Did you see that Netanyahu apparently was hunkered down in the bunker of a billionaire friend, which I thought was ironic? Oh, Netanyahu's hiding in an underground lair. Oh,
yeah, and his son is in Miami, hiding out in Miami in a condo. So yeah,
such brave people. Let me ask you this, everyone in the chat, we've got hundreds and hundreds of people in this town hall right now. We've got dozens and dozens of questions. We're not going to get through all of them. I'm going to do my best. Forgive me if I don't get to your question. Azim Sayed asks, do you see Russia coming to support either Iran or Palestine?
Palestine, no. Iran, yes, with weaponaries. Remember, Iran is supporting Russia in Ukraine through drones and sending them drones. We don't know if they're sending them militias and fighters. I'm not sure of that. We don't have any data in that regard. But Iran, yes, Iran is their allies and their proxy, and they're basically the only country that stood with Russia in their invasion of Ukraine and what they're doing in Ukraine was Iran from the region. And in fairness, also the Emiratis, because they accepted all these billionaires and trillionaires, and they brought their money and their yachts to. So you have actually multiple countries that supported them indirectly, but militarily only Iran. So I believe Russia will absolutely stand with them the same way they stood with Assad.
And of course, I'm glad you mentioned
and China.
I'm glad you mentioned Assad, because, of course, Russia, all of these countries are hypocrites. Everyone, both in the West and the East.
Yes.
Russia now talks about, protecting civilians in Gaza while they kill civilians in Ukraine and helped Assad kill civilians in Syria.
Yeah.
The West criticizes Russia for illegally invading Ukraine while supporting Israel's illegal occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. There's a lot of hypocrisy to go round. And I think we should be clear, there are no virtuous parties here. And just on Iran, you said at the start, you and I have been criticizing Iran for many years. I have many criticisms of the Iranian government. People try and tar me as some kind of Iran supporter. If you say anything that's critical of Israel, you're a Hamas supporter or an Iran supporter. So let's.
Well, Mehdi, yesterday I was interviewed with Ehud Olmert, the former prime minister, and he told me I need to go and criticize my country, Syria, in Syria. And I said to him, well, Mr. ex-prime minister, Mr. Olmert, I'm not actually Syrian. But you see the racism again and again. If we criticize Israel, then we must be allies of somebody else. And it's ridiculous.
To be clear, I'm happy to criticize. I've been critical of Hamas since October 7th and what they did on October 7th. I'm critical of what Iran has done domestically in terms of what's happened to women's protesters, in terms of what happens to minority communities like Baha'i communities. So one of the questioners, and where has it gone? I can't find the name. I'll pull up the name in a second. But somebody asked earlier, this is what happens. We have too many questions. Somebody asked earlier about Iran. I can't see. One of our subscribers asked, is the Iranian government, here we go, an anonymous question. How do the Iranian people feel about the current Iranian government and its policies? Is there any truth to the Western narrative that the Iranian people don't support their government? How would you answer a question like that, Rula?
So this is what we know. We know there is a major protest all over Iran over the killing of Mahsa Amini and over the killing of hundreds and of women who were protesting the mandatory hijab. The Iranian regime is a ruthless regime, and it's a regime. It's basically a dictatorship. And do they support the internal policy, and especially their policies towards women and minorities? Of course not. And they protested, and they were willing to die in order to affirm their right to be free from any imposition from the regime. However, every country, I am confident, and we don't have the polls, that the overwhelming majority don't support a war or striking Iran from Israel or from the United States or anywhere else. Look, a lot of people, I'm asked this question, and very often it's used to justify basically wars. So I saw two tweets that really terrified me, and there are two Israeli pundits, and one said, flatten Tehran, it's time to flatten Iran. Another tweet by a very prominent pundit and journalist in Israel said, the Iranian people will be happy if we wipe out Iran. And it's like, I think Israelis don't understand the region. After 75 years of existing and living in the region, they don't understand the region. They don't understand the people and the mindset.
They've been flattered behind the scenes by the MBSs and the King Abdullahs and the Sisis who support them privately, but the people don't support them. That's the whole, as you pointed out earlier, the reason they don't like the Arab Spring is, the reason they like claiming they're the only democracy in the Middle East is because if all those Arab countries were democracies, the governments would not be supporting Israel. They'd be responding to the people who stand with Palestinians. And Tom Hall, one of our subscribers, asks, Rula, as you pointed out, Jordan helped defend Israel against the attack from Iran. Is Jordan or anyone else in the region likely to join forces against Iran directly if/when the US-Iran war begins?
No. I mean, that would be impossible. But at this point, look, the regime can survive thanks to the Americans. Even the Sisi regime, I mean, they wrecked the economy of this country. They're a corrupt regime. They're repressive. They talk about Palestinian solidarity, but they did nothing basically to help Palestinians. But in the case, for example, of the Jordanians, they even when America attacked Iraq, if you remember, they had a very difficult time. They had millions of Iraqis. King Abdullah understands that Bibi Netanyahu wants to deport and expel Palestinians from the West Bank to go to Jordan, and he doesn't care about the monarchy. He's willing actually to torpedo and undermine. And they were very upset about Queen Rania talking against the famine and the starvation and the decimation of Gaza. However, to join militarily, then they will have revolt inside their country. They will have people, hundreds of thousands, millions of people going to the street demanding that the regime go down, exactly like it happened in Syria and elsewhere. I don't think they can run that risk.
So let's talk about the fallout here in the US, where you and I are right now. Erica Coleman, one of our subscribers, asked, are you concerned that violence from the Middle East will spill over here in the US? And I would add to Erica,
it's already here.
It's already here. I mean, we had little Wadia that the media just moved on for, a little 6-year-old boy,
6 years old,
Illinois, stabbed multiple times to death by a racist who was calling him out for being a Palestinian child. And, Joe Biden has not spoken much about that. Democrats hardly speak about that. The media hardly dwells on this little Palestinian American boy. How bad do you think it could get here at home, especially if Trump comes back?
It's already here, the war. And the war on Palestinians continue to be here, and on pro-Palestinians. We saw also the 3 students shot in Vermont. We saw, I don't know any Palestinians or anybody that is pro-Palestinian that did not get death threats. I myself daily get, I'm desensitized, but I get daily both death threats and rape threats and all kind of threats simply for criticizing Israeli policies, simply for advocating for them to act lawfully and rationally where they are not doing, simply for saying that there's no military solution. And they're equating decimating Hamas with decimating the Palestinians in Gaza, and for calling them out, especially their ministers. One of them, Ben Gvir, who's a terrorist, convicted multiple times for terrorism, who yesterday said, we have 9,000 Palestinian prisoners inside the jail. By the way, 4,000 of those are without any charge and any trial. And he said, we need to start killing them because our prisons are overcrowded. I mean, this is fascism. So when you talk against fascism, what do you think you get? Violence. Well, that's the way they answer.
He objected to the death from cancer of a Palestinian detainee because he said he should have had the death penalty. So he's definitely, he likes the idea of killing Palestinians.
Yeah.
Let me.
But I think it will get worse.
Let me broaden out the conversation here at home, and we've got so many questions. Thank you all for your excellent questions. I wish I could get through them all. We've literally dozens and dozens of questions. We're almost out of time. Claudia Pedone asks, I hope I pronounced that right, Claudia. Forgive me, Claudia, if I mispronounced your name. Students arrested at Columbia University here this week. Students occupying important universities in Italy, which is another country which you are intimately linked to, Rula, clashing with the police. Is the censorship of these voices an ultimate attempt to contain a new positive awareness, raising especially in new generations? That's the question from Claudia.
I think the Israelis and the American right, and I think even the so-called liberals who support militarism, they lost the future. They lost the next generation. They know. So the only way to contain or dominate and control by using violence, intimidation, silencing, censorship. And it's not surprising. I think this is something that we've seen them willing to do elsewhere overseas, but they're now importing their tactics to our universities, to our homes. I'm terrified for these young students who are idealists, who are Jewish, Muslim, Christian, and they see, they believe and they truly want to implement the issue of multi-ethnic democracy. They want to live by the principles and ideals that America inspired them, in rhetoric. But to see that a university like Columbia basically call the police, and the head of the police in New York is led by a Black man, to call the police so they can arrest hundreds of students and then charge them of basically trespassing after they basically banned them and made them and basically kick them out of the university. It terrifies me because these are the scenes that we've seen in China. These are the scenes that we criticize other regimes for doing. This is the things that I grew up in the Middle East with. I mean, I remember assaulting students at Cairo University or Baghdad or elsewhere. I mean, is that what we're becoming? Because this is where we're heading. And I think if Trump will get elected, I fear that students will be killed. I think he will sanction violence against students, not only arrest.
He's openly talked about that. We talked about it on my show, Mehdi Unfiltered, last week, where his defense secretary says that Trump told him to shoot protesters in the legs. And he said, no.
Here you go.
That guy won't be there next time around, Mark Esper. It'll be a sycophant who says, yes, we'll shoot them in the legs.
Absolutely.
He's already talked about killing shoplifters, shooting them as they leave stores. So, of course, he's talked about deporting pro-Palestinian protesters. So it's only going to get worse. Unfortunately, it's already bad, but it's going to get worse. So let's try and end this conversation with a bit of optimism, because of multiple subscribers in the chat. I'm seeing at least half a dozen questions from people saying, what can we do? I have an anonymous question from a man in Germany, or a woman in Germany, apologies, saying, as a German, what can I do as a German citizen to make sure the law is applied everywhere to make the world better and livable for everyone? Another anonymous attendee asks, what can I, as an ordinary American, do? Dreamer76, Rula, says, what can I, as a basically inconsequential American with minimal resources, do to elicit real change? Wayne Ince asks, are there any things the US citizens can do to apply pressure to help stop the Gaza war here? What do you say to people who come and say, we want to do something? Zeteo subscribers, and we appreciate you all, who say, what can we do?
Can I say that you're not helpless? You are an important part of our society, whether you live here or in Germany. Germany provides 30% of weaponries to Israel. Yesterday, the foreign minister of Germany was in Tel Aviv meeting Netanyahu. He called her a Nazi and a liar, simply because she pointed out, and he even leaked it to the media, simply because she pointed out a starvation in Gaza. She criticized the deliberate, orchestrated starvation policy. He said, and he showed her pictures like, oh no, but there's fruits and vegetables. And she said, I don't believe these pictures. And he said, let me quote this directly. He said to her, we're not like the Nazi who produced fake images of manufactured reality. He actually produced fake images.
I mean, he wasn't, of course, he gave himself a get out say, I'm not calling you a Nazi, but that's the implication. We're not like you
But he
guys.
called her a liar.
We're not like
Nazi,
you guys,
basically.
the Nazis who did this. Oh, even though Germany is Israel's closest ally. But sorry, you were saying about what
but if you are in Germany, go and pressure your government to stop arming Israel. Remind them that they are being charged with aiding and abetting a genocide at the ICJ, that Nicaragua brought a case against them, that we might even see in the next day or two arrest warrants against Israeli officials by the ICJ. And if you're an American, look, I understand your frustration and anger, but the only way that we can save this democracy so we can exist I mean, I honestly, I don't know if Palestinians, I think we're watching a genocide, and we're talking as Palestinians to survivors of other genocides about how do we survive this, and what we do, and how we teach our children and grandchildren to continue to affirm life by any means, and to continue our struggle for freedom and equality and justice. So if you are here, you are not helpless. You can help us in many ways. One, and if I may use this, try to save as many Palestinians. I myself actually try to fund many Palestinians who want to leave Gaza before they decimate and they erase and wipe out Rafah. So you can help Palestinians through GoFundMe if you can. If you can't, pressure this country and this government to listen to their own officials who are telling them basically about all the violation that Israel is doing. There was a leak memo where we saw that they've been on the desk of Blinken. You have a report about all the military units who carried torture, who committed rape, and who committed mass killings, including of American citizens in the West Bank. And Blinken basically ignored it. So he cannot ignore it if we continue to talk about it in the media, if we continue to protest and continue to galvanize and mobilize. That's what you can do. That's the only thing that is left to do. And if I may, vote. You will not only have the presidential elections, you have every election. Yeah. So vote, and vote in masses, because if Trump's win, and I would not endorse Joe Biden at this point. I can't, but I understand that the alternative is fascism, full-blown fascism, because he will bring the Gaza rule to the United States.
Rula, we will have to wrap up there on that.
Thank you.
Important note. I would say that you mentioned the threats you get, the horrific threats you get. I know you don't just get them from the Israeli far right, you get them from the Italian far right.
Yes.
I've known you long enough to know that you get threats from multiple regions of the world, sadly, because you stand up for principles and democracy and human rights in multiple regions of the world. I've known you, I think, for over 10 years. I think we met in London in a coffee shop in something like, I want to say 2012, 2013.
Yes.
I'm grayer. You look exactly the same, but I've always wanted to work with you. You've come on my show in the past as guest.
Thank you.
It's fantastic to have you as a collaborator, as a contributor, as part of Zeteo. I think our subscribers just saw your courage, your passion, your eloquence, and I hope they leave here inspired. And I hope we can do this all again very soon. To all of you watching, we've had hundreds of people in this town hall. We've had over 50 questions. I think I got through about 16 of them, which is not as many as I'd have liked, but keep coming back. We will try and do this as often as possible. We appreciate your support. If you have friends and family out there who haven't paid and subscribed to Zeteo, please encourage them to do so. They can come to town halls like this. They can leave comments on articles. They'll get full access to all of our output. You've seen some of the contributors we've rolled out this week. Just today, we rolled out Bassem Youssef. You've seen Rula Jebreal in action. Mehdi Unfiltered will return next week, as will our podcast, which will launch next Thursday, the 25th. We're not kidding. It'll be Bassem and I for the first show. So keep watching Zeteo.com. Keep sharing it with your friends and family. And let's all stay hopeful. Rula, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mehdi. Thank you so much. And I am so proud of you. We need your brilliant, brave voice, especially when everybody seems to be censoring themselves out of fear. You are the most fierce human being I know, and I am honored to work with you.
It's mutual. Appreciate that, Rula.
Thank
you, everyone. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.